Welcome back. Remember last time we were talking about Hatshepsut, the queen who declared herself king and ruled as pharaoh? And because of that, she was erased from all the records. Egypt just didn't want it known that there was a woman who ruled as king. Well, this lecture, we're going to talk about another pharaoh who was erased from the official records. He's the most controversial of all Egyptian pharaohs, and his name is Akhenaten. Now, let me bridge the gap between Hatshepsut and Akhenaten. It's an easy one because they're in the same dynasty. After Hatshepsut, her nephew, Thutmose III, did take the throne, and he was a great pharaoh. He was a military man, led the army north, conquered lands, and Egypt was on a roll. After him, other great pharaohs. And the 18th dynasty is, in a sense, the high point of Egypt. It's when Egypt is at its wealthiest. Egypt is really rolling along. And then we come to Akhenaten, and everything changes. What I want to do with Akhenaten is show you how, when you try to change the three pillars of Egyptian civilization, everything goes wrong. Those three pillars are religion, the pharaoh, and the military. They are all intertwined. And Akhenaten tried to change them all and almost destroyed Egypt. First, let me explain how they're intertwined. First, the military. It's sort of the easiest way to do it. In ancient Egypt, peace was not something to be desired. We think of it as strange that nobody ever wanted peace in ancient Egypt. The idea was that Egypt was supposed to be on top. There was a notion of divine order. Everything had its place, and the right place was for Egypt on top of the Middle East. So what the Egyptians would do periodically was they would take the army, this wonderful standing army that they could support because they had all that food, and they would march north, and they would conquer any territory they wanted. They would go into Canaan. They would go into Syria. They would go south into Nubia. They would conquer and bring back anything that wasn't nailed down. It was their right. So no pharaoh ever ran on the platform of there was peace in my time. No way. So the military was not just a way of defending yourself. For Egypt, it was an economy. It was a way of bringing wealth into the country. So the military was important. Now, how does religion work into this triad of military, religion, and the pharaoh? Well, when the pharaoh came back, victorious as always, he felt that the gods had been good to him. So he would donate a portion of the spoils to the temples of Egypt. So the temples were really supported by military exploits. And the temples were also pro-war. They were doing just fine. As a matter of fact, when Napoleon Bonaparte went to Egypt, 1798, his men looked at the Egyptian temples for the first time. And on the walls of the temple, they saw battle scenes. They saw the pharaoh in the smiting position, ready to kill his enemy. They couldn't believe that this would be a temple showing warfare and killing. So they called them all palaces. And if you read Napoleon Savant's publications, they always called these temples palaces because they figured no temple would ever show anybody being killed. But they didn't realize religion was all for war. They were being supported. Another way that the temple was supported was that the pharaoh would give the temple land when they came back. So they had servants from the wars, they had money from the wars. So religion and the military went hand in hand. Third part of the triad, paying attention, it's the pharaoh, right? Now, the pharaoh was literally the physical leader of Egypt. He was not like, say, a prime minister or a president. He was not a political figurehead who made decisions. He was supposed to literally lead the army in battle. He was the physical leader also. So the pharaoh is the one who marches out at the head of the army and marches back with them, right? And he is the one who is responsible for divine order. By the pharaoh acting properly, divine order is assured in Egypt. So, for example, the pharaoh makes sure that the right offerings are given in the temples so that the gods will look favorably upon him and the army. So it's this triad of you be nice to the gods, the military will go out and win, you come back, You give your donation to the temple, the Pharaoh has assured that divine order is established, and it just keeps on going. So you want a big army, you want good religion, and you want the Pharaoh at the head of it all. Fine. Egypt had it all figured out. Enter Akhenaten, the heretic Pharaoh who was going to change everything. Now, let me say this. Change in Egypt was nothing to be welcomed. Egypt was the most conservative country in the history of the world. Now, why? There are several reasons. Let me start with one. Remember when we talked about burial practices? That in the earliest days, the Egyptians were buried in sand pit burials, and that eventually the body would be mummified naturally because it was hot and dry. It dehydrated the body. But also eventually the sand would blow away and there would be a natural mummy. Well, I think that gave rise to the belief that maybe nothing ever changes. Think about it. You bury someone in a sand pit burial, 1,000 years later, the sand is blown away, and there is a person still recognizable after 1,000 years that if you had known him, you would have said, that's Amenhotep. A recognizable human being after 1,000 years? That leads to the idea that perhaps with death, nothing really changes. There is a sense that it just continues in a different level. This is why I think of all the people of the ancient worlds, the Egyptians were most preoccupied with life after death. This is why they mummified, to preserve the body for the next world, because it was just going to be a continuation of this world. You were literally going to get up and go again in the next world. That's why your body had to be preserved. So even in the religion, we get a very, very strong sense of nothing changes. Now, also in the realm of art, change was not to be desired. Now, you're going to find this as absolutely shocking. But there is no word in the ancient Egyptian language for artist. No word for artist. No word for art. Why? Because they didn't view it as art, believe it or not. I mean, you walk into a museum and it's fabulous art, but they didn't view it as art. Let me explain. Think about this. If you walk into a museum and see a statue from the time of Sneferu, Old Kingdom, 2500 BC, you immediately recognize it as Egyptian art. No problem. It's an Egyptian statue. It might be this pharaoh striding forward, muscular, broad shoulders. Well, that's 2500 BC. 1,000 years later, 1500 BC, time of Queen Hatshepsut, King Hatshepsut, same thing. Pharaoh striding forward, looks exactly the same. 500 BC, same thing. Pharaoh striding forward. They never changed the art. So when you walk into Egypt, into an Egyptian section of the museum, you're looking at 3,000 years of art, and it's all the same. It never changed. Never. Now, why didn't it change? The answer is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Egypt was on top of the world, on top of the world. And they wanted to keep everything the same. So, for example, if in an Egyptian temple, you needed a new statue of maybe the god Bes, you trotted out the old statue and you told the sculptor, copy it. So the artists weren't viewed as artists. They were called sculptor, painter. They were basically just copyists. Creativity was never valued in ancient Egypt. Never. You weren't supposed to be creative. Nobody ever came to the Pharaoh and said, hey, I've got a new idea for a new statue. No way. Do it the same way. We're doing just fine. There is a very, very interesting sort of discussion in Plato, the Greek philosopher Plato, of Egyptian art. I don't know if you know it, but Plato was opposed to art. Didn't like art. Didn't want art. Now, why didn't Plato want art? Because art is illusory. Plato is a philosopher who wants truth. And whenever you get a really good sculpture, well, it looks like the person. It looks like a real person. And that's falsity. So Plato never wanted art. A painting, if it had perspective and really fools you, like Trompe l'oeil, that's no good. It's fooling you. It's falsity. So Plato was opposed to art. The only time Plato speaks positively about art is Egyptian art. Why Egyptian art? Because it's eternal. It never changes. He's looking for eternal truths. And also, Plato was into numbers. He believed that the language of the universe was written in numbers, as in the time of Pythagoras and the Pythagorean theorem. So the Egyptians actually reduced art to paint by numbers. And this is why it all looks the same. They wanted the same proportions. They wanted the same exact measures. When you constructed your tomb in the Valley of the Kings, say Tutmosis I or Hatshepsut, the first thing you did, you went into a tomb and you smoothed the wall. You've carved it out, you've smoothed the wall, and a guy comes in and puts down a grid in red ink, just nice red lines on the wall, squares, checkerboard, a real grid. And that's to guide the painter. So he knows that if a head of a pharaoh is one grid round, then the shoulders are 3.5, and the legs are 2.5, and the waist is this. So everything is always the exact same proportion. So you get this paint by numbers art. It all looks the same. So in art even, no change. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Politically, same political structure. A pharaoh-centric government. You have the pharaoh as your ruler. He is going to take charge. He leads the military. He does all of this, and it never changes. As a matter of fact, the symbol of Egypt in ancient times was the pharaoh smiting. Every country, has an icon. Like maybe for America, it's the bald eagle. Paris, it might be the Eiffel Tower. For Egypt, it was the pharaoh. And the pharaoh had this centralized role, and it was never supposed to change, ever. So you got the same political system. You got the same art. You got the same religion. Now, another thing about the religion is the gods. They worship the same gods for 3,000 years. It never changed. Maybe one got a little more important. They had literally hundreds of gods. And maybe during one time, Amun is the most important. Another time it might be Isis or Sekhmet. But still, it's the same pantheon. Don't change it. So Egypt is the most conservative country in the history of the world, where creativity is not valued, everything's supposed to stay the same, and that is divine order. Enter Akhenaten, who will change everything. Now, why does he change everything? It's a good question. Let me say something about his father first. Akhenaten is during the 18th dynasty, same dynasty as Hatshepsut. Egypt has been rolling on, Tutmosis III, and then we come to his father, Amenhotep III, one of the great pharaohs. Egypt is at its wealthiest. And at the end of Amenhotep III's reign, he's an old man. He takes his son as co-regent. Now, a co-regent is when two people are ruling together as king in Egypt. Why take a co-regent? What is the reason? There are usually two. One is, if it's uncertain political times, this is a way of assuring who your successor will be. If you get knocked off, well, you got a co-regent, he's going to take over. It's not going to be a power grab. The other reason is perhaps sometimes the pharaoh is too ill. He may live too long to lead the army. And if he's too ill, you can also take a co-regent, and the co-regent can rule. So at the end of Amenhotep III's reign, he takes as co-regent his son, who is Amenhotep IV. He's going to change his name to Akhenaten. He's going to become Akhenaten. But for now, he's Amenhotep IV. Now, why the co-regency? I think I can tell you why. I have looked at the mummy of Amenhotep III. And I mean, that's my specialty, mummies. I work with mummies all the time. And when you look at Amenhotep III's teeth, they were horrible, absolutely rotten. And I think they were so bad that he must have been in pain all the time. Probably had to be sedated even. Now, you could sedate him perhaps with wine, or even during the 18th dynasty, opium came in. So, could be even opium, but I think the pain of his teeth was so great that he probably couldn't rule, and his son is brought in to rule with him. Now, there's a curious thing about this son, Amenhotep IV. He is never mentioned in any official document as part of the royal family until he becomes king. He had an older brother who was supposed to become king, named Tutmosis. But the older brother dies early. We have family portraits. Now, when I say family portraits, I don't mean paintings, but statues of Amenhotep with his kids. Often he's got his daughters around him, and they all are given titles. One is a grand wife, one is this, one is that. Even Tutmosis, the son who dies, he's given a title, he's a high priest, but never a mention of Amenhotep IV, ever. And then he's king. We'll talk why. Now, he is co-regent with Dad for about 4 years. Everything goes on fairly normally. His father dies. Everything is quite normal. He continues the monuments that his father built. And the father dies, and then we get a strange thing around his 5th year of ruling. He changes his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten. Now, names are important. They had magical property in Egypt. So, for example, Amenhotep III, Amun-hotep. Amun is the god. Hotep means to be pleased. So Amun is pleased is the name. It's a kind of nice thing about the god. So we know that Amun was an important god. Amenhotep IV, the son, same name. Amun is pleased. How nice. But then he changes it. A slight to the god, Amun, to Akhenaten, which means it is beneficial to the Aten. Now, the Aten was another god. Very minor, very minor. He was a solar disk in the Middle Kingdoms. This is kind of abstract solar deity. Very minor. But all of a sudden, Akhenaten changes his name, becomes Akhenaten. But not only that, he changes the religion of Egypt. Akhenaten is the first monotheist in history. He says all the other gods don't exist. He says there is but one God, and it's the Aten. I mean, literally the first monotheist in history. Remember, this is way before Moses and monotheism and Judaism, Christianity. It's way before. He comes in and says there's only one God. So he's changing religion. Next thing, changes the art. Remember what I was saying about how the Pharaoh was always shown as young and vigorous, always shown broad shoulders, narrow waist, well-muscled, striding forward. The statues of Akhenaten show somebody who's deformed. He is shown with an elongated face, very exaggerated chin, almond-shaped eyes, wide hips, almost like a woman. There is the suggestion of breasts on the statues of Akhenaten. It's almost as if he's androgynous. You can't tell if he's male or female. Now, why? Why is he allowing himself to be shown this way? Perhaps he looked like that. He may have been deformed. This is one theory about why Akhenaten is never mentioned in official records until he's king. He may have been a deformed child that the royal family kept behind him, sort of kept behind them, and that he was never shown at official gatherings, never mentioned because he's deformed. But now he's the only one left. He's got to become king. So he becomes king, and he changes it all. Changes the religion. He says, this isn't my religion, all these gods. I'm with the Aten. He changes the art. He allows himself to be shown, right? Now, think about the consequences of this. If you're saying you're now monotheistic, what happens to the thousands of temples throughout Egypt? What happens to the hundreds of priests who are supported by each temple? The answer is they are closed. They are out of business. Now the third pillar of Egyptian society, the military. Akhenaten has no interest at all in the military. He's not going to be a military man. He doesn't care about such things. He is a religious visionary. He is doing the religion, and that's where it's at for him. So all three pillars of Egyptian society are changed. Now, this was so unpopular. I mean, you don't just walk in and say, okay, your religion's out. The new religion is this. Think of all the old people who had this religion for years. I mean, it's thousands of years of tradition. It was so unpopular that Akhenaten may have been forced. Now, he's Pharaoh. When I say forced, it may have been so unpleasant to leave Thebes, the religious capital of Egypt, and build an entirely new capital for Egypt. He leaves Thebes with his wife. Now, his wife, I mean, it must have been such a strange couple. Akhenaten, this deformed, ugly duckling, and his wife, Nefertiti, who becomes the icon of beauty for all of Egypt. They were married. They are the couple, and they have 2 daughters at this time, and they leave Thebes to build a new city in the desert. He moves the capital about 200 miles north of Thebes to a place called Tel al-Amarna. Shortened, we call it Amarna. And builds an entirely new city. Now, why does he move to this godforsaken place in the desert? The answer is there were no gods there before. Nobody ever lived there before. It's virgin territory. And he's going to build a whole new religious community in the desert. It must have been a little bit like Brigham Young leading the Mormons to Utah. In this vast wasteland, they will build a new society and a new religion. Now, it's interesting to think about who moves with Akhenaten. He's leaving Thebes. Who's going to go with him? My feeling is it's the losers. It's the people who have nothing to lose. They're not that well established in society. And here you got the Pharaoh who's saying, we've got a whole new religion, come with me. Why not? It's kind of like what Janis Joplin says, freedom is nothing left to lose. And the well-established people stay back in Thebes. For example, if you've built your tomb in Thebes and you believe in the old religion that Osiris, the god of the dead, is going to welcome you in the next world, you're not going to leave all that. You're well-established. So the losers, the people who aren't doing well in society, they move with Akhenaten 200 miles north to Tel al-Amarna and start building a city in the desert. It must have been exciting, incredibly exciting. Now, what do? There's nothing there. They literally live in tents while the city is being built. It also must have been an incredible time for construction people, because you need construction workers and people building cities, and the Pharaoh's paying for it all. So they move to the city. Now, Akhenaten erects boundary stela. These are boundary markers around where his city is going to be. It's sort of delimiting the city. And on the boundary stela, he carves a proclamation. First, he says, the Aten, the solar disk, showed me where to build. Showed me where to build. It's a vision, a religious vision that he has of where to build. Now, I was at Amarna about 8 or 9 years ago in a small hotel. Not many tourists go there. It's in the middle of fundamentalist Egypt. And I'm looking out the window at like 5 a.m. And then I saw something that said, my God, Akhenaten was right. What it was, the symbol for horizon in ancient Egyptian is a notch in the mountain with the sun coming over it. So it's a notch with the sun coming over it. I look out my window, and there is a notch in the mountain with the sun right behind it. This must have been what Akhenaten saw. And the name he gives to his city, Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. And I think when he says, the Aten showed me where to build, that's what he meant. It's the horizon of the Aten. So on the stela, he says, the Aten has shown me where to build. And he says, on the stela, I will build this city and I will never leave it. I will not go past its northern boundary. I will not go past its southern boundary. I will not go past its eastern boundary. I will not go past its western boundary. The Pharaoh is never going to leave this city. He certainly can't lead the army. He can't even govern Egypt. He's in isolation here. What is going to happen? Well, Akhenaten continues ruling. He is not the political leader anymore, not the military leader. He only seems to care about religion. We have archives written by the ambassadors, the Egyptian ambassadors to foreign lands. And they write to Akhenaten and say, we're not respected anymore. They are attacking my house. Send the army. Akhenaten never replies. We get another letter back from maybe one guy is named Ribadi. He wrote about 12 letters. He was being attacked. They were beating him up. He says, please, Pharaoh, send, never a reply, ever. Egypt is going downhill, and the Pharaoh doesn't seem to care. He is a religious mystic, and he writes the religious hymns. And I want to read to you the hymn to the Aten. It is a religious hymn written well before either the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Bible by Akhenaten. He is the sole priest of this religion, the high priest. And it's called the Hymn to the Aten. It will sound biblical. I think you'll be amazed. But for Egypt, it's a tremendous change. Just listen. I wish I had a great voice that I could read this in, but this is what he says. Hymn to the Aten by Akhenaten. Splendid you rise, O living Aten, eternal Lord. You are radiant, beauteous, mighty. Your love is great, immense, Your rays light up all faces. Now, first, your rays light up all faces. Egyptian gods were always just for the Egyptians. They weren't for everybody. This is a god for everybody. Next, you who made every land, created what is in it, all peoples, herds, flocks, all trees that grow from the soil. They live when you dawn for them. You are mother and father of all that you made. This is a creator God who creates everything. And then, when you dawn, their eyes observe you. As your rays light the whole earth, every heart acclaims your sight. When you are risen as their Lord, when you set in sky's western lightland, they lie down as if dead. So while the Aten rises, everything's okay. But when he goes, when he sets, things are a little scary, right? It's amazing stuff considering how early it is. Akhenaten is, in a sense, a religious mystic who is really pioneering things that nobody's ever heard. Now, what is the response to this amazing religion? I don't think anybody ever got it. He is so far ahead of himself. This Aten is not a god that you can sculpt a statue of. It's an abstract principle of light almost. It's so abstract, and the Egyptians are so used to concrete gods that nobody really embraced the religion. Nobody. Even on the boundary stela, he says, no one can make an image of you. All the sculptors who used to carve all the statues of the gods, out of business. Out of business. So Akhenaten builds his city in the desert. It was a large city, by the way. He had probably 25, 30,000 people living there. Following him, he's writing the hymns, and there are tremendous changes. Remember how I said in the other lecture that everybody in Egypt was buried on the west side because the west was associated with the dead, because the sun sets or dies in the west? Not at Amarna, not at Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. Tombs are on the east. And we don't even know if there's a life after death under Akhenaten. It's not clear. There's no longer Osiris, the god of the west, to welcome you. Do you resurrect in the next world? We don't even know. We don't even know if there was a real firm belief in life after death. Akhenaten built a tomb, not in the Valley of the Kings, because he's left that and will never leave his city. He built it in a valley that looks just like the Valley of the Kings, though. I think there was a bit of nostalgia. He was looking back to his father's days, and he's isolated. So he built a tomb in a valley, very isolated, very remote, a large tomb for himself. And on the tomb walls, he shows things that have never been shown on a tomb wall before. And this is where the art also changes. There's an absolutely remarkable scene. Now, as far as we know, Akhenaten only had two wives, not many. He has the beautiful Nefertiti, who is the Hemet Weret, the great wife. There's only one of those. And there's a minor wife named Kia. On the royal tomb walls is a scene. Akhenaten and Nefertiti are standing by a bed, and they are mourning. They are actually leaning over as if crying. And on the bed is a dead woman. Behind the bed, a nurse holds a child, with a shade over it, a sunshade. That's a sign of royalty. What's going on here is probably a royal child has been born. A woman has died, and Akhenaten and Nefertiti are crying. They're mourning. You never see daily life scenes of pharaohs on tombs. All you see them is battling in front of the gods. But here you've got the royal family mourning. Other scenes that Akhenaten permits to be carved on the walls. The family at home. It shows Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They're sitting on chairs, and they've got kids on their laps. One kid's eating a duck, right? She's got sticky fingers, and they're kissing each other. It's family values for Akhenaten. It's an amazing time, and Akhenaten has changed almost everything. All three pillars: the role of the pharaoh, role of religion, right? Art, everything has changed. And Egypt is going downhill. He may have been happy at Tel el-Amarna, but it all ends in tragedy. In the 17th year of his reign, Akhenaten dies. And it leaves a tremendous question. What do we do? Do we continue with this new religion of the Aten? Or do we go back to the old religion of many gods. We'll talk about that next time. So I'll see you next time.